The garden looked beautiful, but Sophia's roses were dying. I stood at the edge of my daughter-in-law's property, staring at the once pristine rose bushes that lined the front walk, brown petals scattered across the mulch. Weeds pushed through the carefully maintained beds. Sophia would never let her garden get like this. Never in the 7 years I'd known her. 6 weeks. That's how long it had been since I'd heard from her. 6 weeks since Marcus, my son, had called to tell me Sophia was on a wellness retreat in British Columbia. Some meditation center in the mountains, he'd said. No phones, no contact with the outside world, just healing and inner peace. I'm 64 years old. I've raised 3 children. I know when something doesn't sit right. Sophia loved those roses more than anything except Marcus. She'd planted them the week they moved into this house in Richmond Hill, carefully selecting each variety. Peace roses, she'd told me, symbolized her hope for their marriage. Mr. Lincoln roses for strength, double delight for joy. She wouldn't just leave them to die. I'd tried calling Marcus again this morning. He'd sounded irritated, said I needed to respect Sophia's space, that she needed this time away from everyone, including me. Especially me, his tone had suggested. But here's what my son didn't know. Sophia had told me she was allergic to incense. Most meditation centers burned incense constantly. She'd laughed about it once, said she'd have to find other ways to find inner peace, ways that didn't make her sneeze. I walked up the front path, my shoes crunching on fallen petals. The house was a beautiful 2-story brick colonial, the kind Marcus had always dreamed of designing. He was an architect, proud of his work, always showing me photos of the buildings he'd created. This house was his masterpiece, he'd said, every detail perfect. I still had the spare key they'd given me 2 years ago. For emergencies, Sophia had said, pressing it into my hand, just in case. My hand shook as I slid the key into the lock. Was this an emergency? Or was I just an overbearing mother-in-law, the kind Sophia had joked about becoming when she got older? The door swung open. The smell hit me first, not the usual scent of Sophia's lavender candles or the vanilla coffee she loved. Something stale, something wrong. I stepped inside, my heart pounding. Everything looked normal at first glance. The furniture was in place, no signs of a struggle, but there was dust, a thin layer coating the coffee table, the mantel above the fireplace. Sophia was meticulous about cleaning. She'd wipe down surfaces every evening while watching her British baking shows. I moved through the living room, my footsteps too loud in the silence. The kitchen was worse. Dishes in the sink, something green growing in a pot on the stove, a container of milk left out on the counter, long since spoiled. This wasn't right. This wasn't Sophia at all. I pulled out my phone to call Marcus, then stopped. What would I say? Your house is messy, so I broke in? He'd be furious. He'd been so defensive lately whenever I mentioned Sophia, so protective of her healing journey. I should leave. Lock up, go home, wait for Sophia to come back from wherever she really was. But I couldn't. Something in my gut screamed at me to stay, to look harder. I walked through the dining room, the office, the downstairs bathroom. Everything had that same layer of dust, that same feeling of abandonment. Upstairs, the bedroom was unmade, clothes scattered across the floor, Marcus's clothes. He was still living here, clearly, but living like a bachelor, not a married man waiting for his wife to come home. Back downstairs, I stood in the kitchen, trying to think. Where else could I look? Where else might tell me what was happening? That's when I noticed the window over the sink. It faced the backyard, where Marcus had built Sophia an art studio 2 years ago. A beautiful conversion of the old garden shed with skylights and proper insulation. Sophia painted there, her watercolors of flowers and landscapes. She'd been so excited when he'd finished it. The studio door had a new lock on it. I could see it from here, glinting in the afternoon sun. A heavy padlock, the kind you'd use on a storage unit or a garage, not the simple key lock that had been there before. Why would an art studio need a padlock? I moved to the back door, my breath coming faster. This was crazy. I was imagining things. Maybe Marcus was storing valuable tools out there. Maybe Sophia had asked him to secure her paintings before she left. But Sophia never locked that studio. She told me once that she liked knowing anyone could walk in and see beauty. That art should be accessible, not hidden away. The backyard was overgrown too. The grass needed cutting, the flower beds were choked with weeds. I crossed the lawn, my shoes sinking into the soft earth. It had rained last night, that spring rain that made everything in Ontario smell fresh and alive. But I smelled nothing. I felt nothing but a growing dread that made my skin prickle. The studio was about 20 feet from the house, positioned near the back fence. Marcus had designed it himself, proud of the way it captured natural light. The skylights ran along the entire roof, making the interior bright and welcoming. Except now the skylights were covered, painted over from the inside with something dark. No light came through. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I should call someone. The police? Marcus? But what would I say? I walked around the studio, looking for windows. There were two, one on each side. Both had been covered too, with what looked like black paper taped from the inside, the kind of paper you'd use for photography, to block out light completely. Why would Sophia need her studio completely dark? I pressed my ear against the door. Nothing at first, just silence. Then so faint I almost missed it, a sound. A soft scraping, like something being dragged across the floor. Then quiet again. My heart stopped. Someone was in there. I knocked, my knuckles rapping against the wood. The sound seemed too loud, too aggressive. I waited, holding my breath. Nothing. I knocked again, harder. Called out, my voice cracking. Sophia? Sophia, are you in there? Silence. But not empty silence. The kind of silence that holds its breath, waiting. Then, so quiet I barely heard it. A whisper. A voice I knew. Halen? I grabbed the padlock, yanked on it. Solid, immovable. A combination lock, the kind you couldn't break without bolt cutters. Sophia. I was shouting now, not caring who heard me. Sophia, I'm here. I'm getting help. I ran back to the house, my phone already dialing 911. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold it. 911. What's your emergency? There's someone locked in a shed. My daughter-in-law. She's trapped. Please, you have to send someone. The operator's voice was calm, professional. She asked for the address, asked if I was in danger, asked if I knew who had locked the door. I couldn't answer that last question, because the answer sat in my throat like a stone. Marcus. My son. What had he done? The police arrived within 10 minutes, though it felt like hours. 2 officers, a man and a woman. Officer Rodriguez, I'd remember his name later, was the one who approached me first. Young, maybe 30, with kind eyes that took in my shaking hands and tear-stained face. Ma'am, I need you to tell me exactly what you heard. I explained everything. The 6 weeks of silence, the dying roses, the locked studio, the voice calling my name. He listened, his expression growing more serious with each detail. Do you have reason to believe someone is in danger? I nodded, unable to speak. The female officer, Officer Chen, according to her name badge, was already on her radio, calling for backup and bolt cutters. They made me wait by the house while they approached the studio. Officer Rodriguez called out, identified himself as police, demanded whoever was inside to respond. Nothing. Just that heavy, waiting silence. Then, so faint, the same whisper. Help, please. Officer Chen had the bolt cutters. She positioned them on the padlock, her muscles straining as she squeezed. The lock resisted, then suddenly gave with a metallic snap that echoed across the yard. Officer Rodriguez pulled the door open. I couldn't see inside from where I stood, but I saw both officers freeze. Officer Chen's hand went to her radio immediately. We need an ambulance. Now. Female victim appears to be severely dehydrated and malnourished. I started toward them, but Officer Rodriguez held up his hand. Ma'am, please stay back. We need to secure the scene. But I saw her. Just a glimpse before Officer Chen moved to block my view. Sophia, my beautiful daughter-in-law with her bright laugh and gentle hands, was curled on a thin mattress in the corner. Her dark hair, usually so carefully styled, hung in matted tangles around her face. Her skin was gray, her lips cracked and bleeding. She wore the same yoga pants and t-shirt I'd seen her in 6 weeks ago, now hanging off her skeletal frame. She was alive. Barely, but alive. The ambulance arrived, then more police. Detective Sarah Kim, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, took charge of the scene. They brought Sophia out on a stretcher, an IV already running into her arm. I tried to follow, but Detective Kim stopped me. "Mrs. Westbrook, I need to ask you some questions." I couldn't take my eyes off the ambulance as they loaded Sophia inside. "I need to go with her. She needs someone. The paramedics are taking good care of her. Right now, I need you to tell me everything you know about this situation, starting with who has access to this property." The question I'd been dreading. "My son, Marcus. He lives here with Sophia, his wife." Detective Kim's expression didn't change, but I saw something shift in her eyes. "Where is your son now?" "I don't know. At work, I assume. He's an architect. At Henderson and Associates downtown." She nodded to one of the uniformed officers, who immediately stepped away to make a call. Then, she turned back to me, her voice gentle but firm. "Mrs. Westbrook, I need you to understand something. What we found in that studio suggests your daughter-in-law has been held prisoner for several weeks. There's evidence of sustained confinement, minimal food and water, no bathroom facilities beyond a bucket. This is a serious crime. When we locate your son, he will be questioned extensively." I knew what she was really saying. When they located Marcus, he would be arrested. My son, my first child, the baby boy I'd rocked and sung to and cheered for at every soccer game and graduation. My son was a monster. I don't remember much of the next few hours. I know I gave a statement, told Detective Kim everything I knew, how Marcus had said Sophia was on a retreat, how he'd discouraged me from trying to contact her, how he'd seemed annoyed whenever I asked questions. I told her about the life insurance policy Marcus had mentioned last year. $2 million. He'd seemed so proud that he could afford such good coverage for both of them. Protection, he'd called it, for the future. I told her about Vanessa, the woman Marcus worked with, how he'd mentioned her name more and more often over the past 6 months, how Sophia had joked about it once, called her Marcus's work wife, but there'd been something brittle in her laugh. I told her everything, and with each word, I felt something break inside me. They found Marcus at his office. Detective Kim told me later that he'd seemed surprised, then concerned, then angry. He'd insisted there must be some mistake, that Sophia was supposed to be in British Columbia, that he couldn't understand how she'd ended up in their studio. He was a good liar. I'd raised him to be honest, to be kind, to be strong. Somewhere along the way, I'd failed. At the hospital, Sophia drifted in and out of consciousness. The doctors said she was severely dehydrated and malnourished, with signs of prolonged psychological trauma. She'd lost nearly 30 pounds. Her kidneys were on the verge of failure. Another few days, maybe a week, and she wouldn't have survived. I sat beside her bed, holding her hand. It was so thin, the bones prominent beneath papery skin. This wasn't the same woman who'd hugged me goodbye 6 weeks ago, who'd promised to bring me back some of that tea I liked from the Asian market. When she finally opened her eyes, they were hollow, empty. "Helen," she whispered. "You came." I couldn't stop crying. "Of course I came. Of course. Sophia, what did he do to you?" She closed her eyes, and for a moment I thought she'd fallen back asleep. Then she started talking, her voice barely audible. Marcus had drugged her coffee one morning. She'd woken up in the studio, her hands and feet bound. He'd told her they were going on a trip, just the two of them. But first, she needed to sign some papers. "Nothing important," he'd said. "Just updating their will, their property deeds, standard stuff." But Sophia had taken a law course in university. She'd recognized the documents, life insurance policies, property transfers, everything they owned being signed over to Marcus alone, including the house her grandmother had left her, worth over $1 million in Richmond Hills Market. She'd refused, so he'd left her there. He'd come once a day, sometimes every other day, with minimal food and water. Enough to keep her alive, but weak. Too weak to break down the door he'd reinforced with steel plates. Too weak to scream for help after he'd soundproofed the walls with the same materials he used in his architectural projects. He'd told everyone she was on a retreat. He'd even sent emails from her account, cheerful messages about finding inner peace and disconnecting from technology. He'd thought of everything. 6 weeks. He'd kept her prisoner for 6 weeks, waiting for her to become desperate enough to sign, waiting for her mind to break so he could manipulate her into giving him everything. And then he'd planned an accident. A hiking trip in Algonquin Park. A tragic fall. A grieving widower with a $2 million insurance policy and a valuable house, completely free and clear. Sophia had heard him talking on the phone to Vanessa. They'd already picked out a new house together, bigger, in Forest Hill. They'd already planned their future, built on Sophia's grave. Detective Kim came to see me 3 days after Sophia was found. She sat in the hospital cafeteria across from me, a cup of terrible coffee between us. We've charged Marcus with forcible confinement, attempted murder, and fraud. The Crown Attorney is confident we have enough evidence to convict. I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. Mrs. Westbrook, I need to prepare you for what comes next. The trial will be difficult. You'll likely be called as a witness. You'll have to testify about what you saw, what you knew, what Marcus told you. I know. My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. There's something else. Marcus is claiming this is all a misunderstanding. He says Sophia was having a mental health crisis, that he was trying to help her. He's painting himself as the victim. I looked up at her then, saw the anger burning in her eyes. Not at me, at my son. That's not what happened. I know. The evidence is clear. But he's a well-spoken, successful architect with no criminal record. His lawyer is good. This won't be easy. She was warning me, preparing me for the fight ahead. Marcus called me from jail 3 days later. I almost didn't answer, but Detective Kim had said anything he told me could be used as evidence, so I picked up. Mom. His voice was the same one he'd used as a child when he'd broken something and knew he was in trouble. Mom, you have to help me. This is all a mistake. Sophia's confused. She's sick. I was trying to help her. I listened to him lie to me for 5 minutes. Then I said, very quietly, I saw her, Marcus. I saw what you did. Silence. Then, his voice changing, becoming cold, becoming someone I didn't recognize. You're really going to take her side? Your son is sitting in jail, and you believe some woman over me? That woman is your wife. And yes, I believe her, because she was the one locked in a shed, starving to death. He hung up on me. It was the last time we spoke. The trial began 3 months later. Summer in Toronto, the kind of humid heat that makes everything feel heavy and slow. I sat in the courtroom every day, listening to the evidence. The paramedics testified about Sophia's condition when they found her. The doctors explained how close she'd come to kidney failure. The locksmith testified about the soundproofing materials, the reinforced door, the combination padlock that required specialized knowledge to install. Detective Kim presented Marcus's phone records. Hundreds of texts to Vanessa, love messages, planning messages, messages about their future together once he was free. The insurance agent testified about the $2 million policy Marcus had taken out on Sophia just 14 months earlier, how Marcus had called twice to verify the payout terms, asking specifically about accidental death clauses. The IT specialist testified about the emails sent from Sophia's account, all sent from Marcus's laptop at times when Sophia was already imprisoned in the studio. And then it was my turn. Crown Attorney Jennifer Walsh, a woman with kind eyes and a steel spine, guided me through my testimony. I told the truth, all of it. How Marcus had discouraged me from contacting Sophia, how he'd seemed annoyed by my questions, how he'd always had an answer ready, always so logical, so reasonable, how I'd almost believed him. Marcus's lawyer tried to discredit me, asked if I'd always had a difficult relationship with my son, if I preferred Sophia to him, if I was jealous of their marriage. I looked at Marcus then, sitting at the defense table in a suit I'd bought him for his 30th birthday. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I loved my son, I said clearly. I loved him from the moment he was born. I loved him through every stage of his life. But love doesn't mean blindness. It doesn't mean excusing evil. And what he did to Sophia was evil. The jury was out for 4 hours. They came back with a verdict of guilty on all counts. Marcus was sentenced to 15 years in prison. The judge called it one of the most calculated, cold-blooded cases she'd ever presided over. She noted that without my intervention, Sophia would certainly have died. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a mother who'd failed to see the darkness growing in her own child. Sophia moved in with me after she was released from the hospital. She didn't have anywhere else to go. The house in Richmond Hill had to be sold, the proceeds going toward legal fees and restitution. Her art studio, once her haven, was now a crime scene, then evidence, then just a memory too painful to keep. We didn't talk much those first few weeks. She was still recovering, physically and emotionally. The doctors said her kidneys would heal with time. They were less certain about her mind. But slowly, over cups of tea and quiet evenings, we built something new. Not the polite relationship of mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, something deeper, something real. She told me about her childhood, growing up in Vancouver with parents who'd immigrated from China. She told me about her grandmother, who'd taught her to paint, who'd left her the house in Richmond Hill with the hope that Sophia would build a life there. A good life, full of love and art and roses. I told her about raising Marcus, about the sweet boy he'd been. The child who'd cried over dead birds, who'd spent hours building elaborate structures out of blocks, who'd dreamed of creating beautiful spaces for people to live in. I told her I didn't know when that boy had disappeared, when he'd become someone who could look at a human being and see only an obstacle to wealth. She forgave me, though I hadn't asked for forgiveness. She said it wasn't my fault, that evil can grow anywhere, even in the best families, even in the hearts of people who should know better. A year later, she planted a rose garden in my backyard. Peace roses, for the peace we'd found together. Mr. Lincoln roses, for the strength we'd needed. And a new variety I'd never seen before. Iceberg roses, pure white and resilient. For new beginnings, she told me. For the family we choose. I'm 65 now, Sophia is 32. We live together in my house in Thornhill, and I've started calling her my daughter. Not my daughter-in-law, just my daughter, because that's what she is. Marcus is in prison. He'll be eligible for parole in 8 years. I don't know if I'll be alive to see it. I don't know if I'll visit him if I am. Some people say you should always forgive family, always give them another chance. But I think about those 6 weeks. I think about Sophia, alone in the dark, slowly starving, wondering if anyone would notice she was gone. I think about how close I came to believing Marcus's lies, to turning around and going home, leaving Sophia to die. And I think about the roses, how they knew something was wrong before I did, how they started dying the moment Sophia disappeared, as if they could sense their caretaker's absence. I learned something important through all of this. Family isn't just blood. It isn't just the people you're born to or the children you raise. Family is the people who show up, the people who stay, the people who choose love and truth, even when it costs them everything. I lost a son, but I gained a daughter. And while I grieve for the boy Marcus was, for the man he could have been, I don't regret the choice I made. I don't regret saving Sophia's life. If I could go back, I would do it all again, faster this time, without the doubts and fears that almost made me turn away. If there's anything I want people to understand from this story, it's this. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let politeness or social conventions or fear of seeming nosy stop you from checking on the people you care about. That phone call you've been meaning to make it today. That friend you haven't heard from in a while, reach out. That family member who's on a retreat or taking space or dealing with personal issues, make sure they're actually okay. Because sometimes the people who seem fine are the ones who need help most. Sometimes the people we trust are the ones we should fear. And sometimes, the only thing standing between life and death is someone who cares enough to notice the roses dying. I noticed. Thank God I noticed. And now, every morning, I walk through our garden with Sophia. We water the roses together, check for pests, deadhead the spent blooms. We talk about her paintings, about my book club, about the small, ordinary things that make up a life. These are the moments Marcus tried to steal. These quiet, beautiful, unremarkable moments of simply being alive. But Sophia survived. We both survived, and we built something new from the ashes of what was lost. That's not the ending Marcus planned, but it's the ending Sophia deserved, and every day I'm grateful I was there to make sure she got it. Check on the people you love. Notice when something feels wrong. Trust your gut. And remember, the family that matters most is the family that shows up when it counts. Not the blood we share, but the lives we choose to protect. That's what family really means.